I think just the qualities that are essential. I think it's important to grow into a particular role with the right.
There are moments inside the British royal family that the public never gets to see. Not the balcony waves, not the charity galas, not the carefully crafted press photos. The real moments, the ones that happen behind closed doors, in hushed corridors, where composure finally cracks and the truth of what people actually feel comes spilling out. This was one of those moments. On the day Buckingham Palace released its announcement that Prince George had been awarded a prestigious ceremonial title, a historic honor reserved only for heirs to the throne, the public reaction was warm, celebratory, the kind of feel-good royal story that gets shared 100,000 times before noon. But inside the palace walls, according to multiple well-placed royal sources, Queen Camilla was in tears, not because she dislikes Prince George, not because she begrudges a young boy his rightful royal destiny, but because that title, that specific honor, was one that Camilla had quietly, privately, and deeply hoped might one day be extended to her own grandson, Freddie Parker Bowles. And the way she found out it was going to George instead, she read the palace press release, the same one you and I read. No phone call, no private briefing, no courtesy from her own husband, the King of England, just cold, formal ink on a page and a message that couldn't have been clearer if it had been written in capital letters. Your family does not belong here. That is the story we're breaking down today. And trust me, it goes far deeper than one title, one snub, or one afternoon of tears. This is about a fundamental battle for the soul of the British monarchy that has been quietly raging for years, and it just erupted into the open. Stay right here, because this one is going to change how you see the royal family entirely. Brio is Camilla, really. To understand why this moment gutted Queen Camilla the way it reportedly did, you have to understand her journey, and not the polished, official version, the real one. Camilla Rosemary Shand, now Her Majesty Queen Camilla, did not walk into royal life through the front door. She clawed her way through the back. She spent the better part of 3 decades being publicly vilified as the woman who destroyed the people's princess's marriage. The tabloids were merciless, the public was unforgiving, and even within the palace itself, her presence was tolerated more than it was welcomed. Her transformation from royal mistress to queen consort is, depending on who you ask, either one of the most remarkable image rehabilitation stories in modern history, or proof that with enough patience and proximity to power, anything is possible. Either way, she made it. She wore the crown at the coronation. She stood on the balcony. She gave the speeches. But here's what the cameras never capture. Camilla has 2 children of her own from her first marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles, Tom Parker Bowles, and Laura Lopes. And unlike virtually everyone else who surrounded the king on coronation day, they hold no royal titles. They are not working royals. In the eyes of the palace machinery, they are, in the firm's terminology, civilians. That word, civilians. Imagine being the Queen's own children and being referred to that way. And Camilla's grandchildren, including Freddie Parker Bowles, Tom's son, occupy that same gray zone, warmly received at family gatherings, occasionally photographed at royal events, emotionally close to the king, but officially, formally, historically, nowhere to be found. Do you think that sits easily with a grandmother who has given everything to this institution? Because the sources say it absolutely does not. The Quiet Campaign. Here is something that has never been fully reported until now. According to royal insiders, Queen Camilla has spent years, not months, years, conducting what can only be described as a quiet, careful, highly strategic campaign to shift the monarchy's perception of her family. It didn't start with demands. Camilla is far too politically savvy for that. It started with presence, with access, with small, deliberate moves. Freddie Parker Bowles began appearing more regularly at private royal gatherings. Photographs at Windsor that would never have included him a decade ago suddenly featured him front and center. When palace newsletters were being assembled and family Christmas card images were being selected, sources say Camilla made sure her grandchildren were visible. She introduced Freddie at private charity dinners. She spoke about his accomplishments at palace events. She made him real to the people whose opinions matter inside those walls. One retired palace aide, speaking anonymously, described it this way: "She never openly lobbied for titles. She was far too careful for that. What she did instead was make her family impossible to ignore. And then she waited for that familiarity to do its work." And behind closed doors, sources confirm there were actual conversations about the possibility of a minor hereditary honor for Freddie. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that would draw public scrutiny or tabloid outrage. Perhaps a baronetcy, a small symbolic gesture that would give him a formal place in the royal directory and give Camilla something she had been working toward for the better part of a decade. A sense that her sacrifice meant something for the people she loves most. Think about that for a moment. This woman endured decades of public humiliation. She survived being made into a national villain. She outlasted the critics, the campaigns, the protests, the Diana devotees who still can't bear to speak her name with anything less than contempt. And her private hope, the thing she held on to through all of that, was that her grandchildren might one day carry a small piece of royal recognition because of what she had given. Is that really so unreasonable? The wall William built, but from the other side of the palace, another vision was taking shape, and it had no room in it for Camilla's hopes. From the moment Prince William and Princess Catherine stepped into senior royal roles, the people closest to them say their governing philosophy has been consistent, unwavering, and, some would argue, ruthless in its clarity. Protect the bloodline, protect the brand, slim the monarchy down to its essential core and make it bulletproof for the next generation. William does not want a sprawling royal family. He does not want confusion about who counts and who doesn't. He does not want the kind of satellite court that other monarchies have descended into, relatives upon relatives with titles and allowances and no clear purpose, bleeding the institution's credibility dry. His model, according to insiders, is Scandinavian. Fewer working royals, cleaner lines, a royal family that the public can understand and support without having to keep track of a family tree that extends halfway across Britain. And within that vision, the question of Camilla's family was never really a question at all. It was settled before it was ever asked. William and Catherine are said to have been privately uncomfortable from the earliest stages of Camilla's quiet campaign. Not hostile, not openly opposed, but firm. An insider described William's approach. He didn't fight, he didn't debate, he simply didn't engage. When suggestions floated up through the palace about enhanced recognition for the Parker Bowles family, they were met not with confrontation, but with something far more definitive: silence. And in royal politics, silence is its own kind of answer. Sar Moshem Kubaintem. Catherine is reportedly equally clear-eyed on this issue. It has nothing to do with personal animosity toward Camilla or her children. It is about optics, about strategy, about what happens when a monarchy built on the idea of blood and sacred lineage starts making exceptions based on step-family affection. In an era where the institution is already under intense scrutiny, where every decision is dissected, every expense examined, every appointment questioned, any move that smells like favoritism or nepotism could cause serious damage. So William drew a line, and he drew it quietly, firmly, and permanently. The Parker Bowles family would be personally welcomed at family events. They would not be institutionally recognized. The crown's future belonged to the Mountbatten Windsors. Full stop. Now ask yourself this: if you were Camilla, and you knew this wall existed, and you were watching your grandson grow up on the edges of a world that would never formally claim him, how long could you hold it together?
The title that broke everything.
Which brings us to the moment that shattered whatever fragile equilibrium had been holding things together. Buckingham Palace announced that Prince George had been awarded a historic ceremonial title, a designation that has been passed down through the royal line for centuries, given only to those destined to one day sit on the throne. It is not a minor honor. It is a statement, a declaration of succession, of legitimacy, of belonging. And it is exactly the kind of ceremonial recognition that sources close to Camilla say she had harbored quiet hopes might one day be adapted or extended in some form. Not this exact title, but something equivalent in spirit, to acknowledge Freddie Parker Bowles' place adjacent to the royal family. Those hopes died the morning that press release went out, because Camilla found out the same way the rest of the country did. She opened the official palace announcement, and saw Prince George's name. No one had called her. No one had warned her. No one inside the institution she had served for decades, including the man she had stood beside through everything, had thought to give her a heads up, or, if they had thought about it, they had decided against it. An insider said she saw that name and simply froze. Now let's be precise about what that silence communicates, because this is important. This isn't about proper royal procedure being followed. In royal circles, private advance warnings for sensitive announcements are entirely standard. Senior members are briefed. Potential reactions are managed. Feelings are considered. Not always, not perfectly, but as a matter of routine institutional courtesy. Camilla did not receive that courtesy. Whether that was an oversight or a deliberate choice is something only a small number of people inside the palace know for certain. But the effect was the same. The Queen of England learned through a public press release that a door she had spent years quietly trying to open had just been welded shut. What happened behind closed doors? What came next? According to multiple accounts from people with knowledge of events that evening, was extraordinarily raw. At Clarence House, away from cameras, away from staff who might talk, Camilla reportedly fell apart. Not in the restrained, composed way that royals are trained to manage distress. Completely. She was said to have been alone in her private sitting room with only a small number of trusted aides nearby, holding the printed announcement and saying words that no one inside that institution expected to ever hear from her. They have erased us. After everything, they have erased us. That is grief. That is the grief of someone who has sacrificed an enormous amount and believed, perhaps naively, that sacrifice eventually gets rewarded. That if you are loyal enough, patient enough, disciplined enough, the institution will eventually make space for the people you love. It didn't. And then came the confrontation with Charles. King Charles reportedly tried to offer comfort. He came prepared with explanations, tradition, public expectation, the delicate balancing act required of the modern monarchy. All things Camilla herself knows better than almost anyone. She's lived those realities for decades. But she wasn't in the mood for explanations. According to sources, she asked him directly, in a way that left no room for diplomacy. Did you even try? And reportedly, the king, who has spent his entire adult life caught between his private heart and his public duty, had no good answer. Because the answer, based on what insiders have said, is complicated. He did consider alternatives. He reportedly floated the idea of a lower, separate honor for Freddie as a compromise. But when William made clear that he was opposed, not just unenthusiastic, actively opposed, Charles made his choice. He chose the crown. He chose his heir. He chose the institution over his wife's deepest private wish. And Camilla, according to those close to her, told him exactly how that felt. She told him he had let them humiliate her. And then she canceled her public commitments in the days that followed, officially citing health concerns, and withdrew. The staff noticed. Camilla, who has developed a reputation for composure and warmth even under pressure, was quiet, distant, cold in a way they hadn't seen before. And Charles, unusually, did not press her, because he knew precisely what he had done and what it cost. Charles? The king caught in the middle. Let's talk about King Charles for a moment, because his position in all of this deserves proper examination. Charles has always been a man pulled in multiple directions simultaneously. He loves Camilla deeply, that is not in question. He also understands, perhaps better than any living person, what the monarchy requires and what the cost of defying its internal logic can be. He watched his own parents make decisions about duty over family that shaped him in ways he has spent decades processing publicly. And now he sits at the very top of the institution, wearing the crown, with all the power it confers. And yet, on this specific question, insiders say Charles bowed to William. That tells you something profound about where real power now sits inside the British monarchy. Charles may sign the documents. His face is on the stamps. He presides over the state occasions and reads the king's speech. But William, the future, controls the direction. And when those two visions came into conflict over the question of Camilla's family, it was William's vision that prevailed. Charles reportedly agonized over it. Sources say he is genuinely sympathetic to Camilla's position and that he has told her privately, on more than one occasion, that they would find the right moment for her family to receive some form of recognition. He wasn't lying to her. He believed it. He intended it. But intention without action is just a more polite form of disappointment. And Camilla has been receiving polite disappointments from this institution for her entire adult life. The question you have to ask yourself is this: at what point does love become insufficient? When Charles says he did what he had to do for the crown, and Camilla says he let them humiliate her, who, in the context of a marriage between two people who have already survived more than most couples could imagine, is right? There may not be a clean answer, but the damage is real. The generational divide taking shape. Now zoom out, because this isn't just a family drama playing out in private rooms. It is a preview of what the British monarchy is going to look like for the next 30 to 40 years. And the picture that's emerging is stark. On one side of this divide, you have the Windsor core: William, Catherine, George, Charlotte, Louis. A family being shaped with extraordinary deliberateness for public life. George is already accumulating the kind of ceremonial credentials that signal what is coming. He is not just growing up royal, he is being built into a sovereign. The titles, the patronages, the careful introductions to diplomatic and military circles, all of it is intentional. All of it is preparation. On the other side, you have the Parker Bowles family. Camilla's grandchildren, children who have grown up in proximity to royalty, who celebrate Christmas with the Wales children, who walk through palace corridors and attend royal events, but who appear in no official registry, hold no title, and are being given a message with every passing year that is utterly impossible to misread. This world is not yours. Now consider what happens to those children as they grow up. Freddie Parker Bowles is not a toddler anymore. He is old enough to understand what titles mean, what recognition means, what his grandmother's position in that family means, and also what his own position isn't. He will watch Prince George's profile grow. He will see the announcements, read the press releases, watch the ceremonies, and he will understand. One royal source put it bluntly: feelings don't disappear just because the palace chooses to stay silent about them. The resentment that gets seeded now doesn't bloom immediately, but it blooms eventually. And for Camilla, every time George receives another honor, every time another milestone is marked with grandeur and ceremony, she will feel the contrast afresh. Not because she wants George to have less, but because she wanted Freddie to have something, anything. And the answer, delivered without the dignity of a conversation, was no. What this reveals about William and Kate's monarchy: let's be honest about something that rarely gets said plainly in mainstream royal coverage. William and Catherine are broadly popular. Their public image is warm, grounded, and carefully managed. The world sees a couple who have modernized the monarchy without threatening its traditions, who are raising their children with an unusual degree of normality, who genuinely seem to understand the pressures of public expectation. But the vision they are building for the institution is not soft, it is not sentimental, it is strategically hard.
Paper close.
To William's say, he views the monarchy's survival as dependent on absolute clarity about who belongs and who doesn't. Not because of any personal coldness. By all accounts, he treats Camilla respectfully in person, but because he believes ambiguity is existential risk. Once you start making exceptions based on relationships rather than lineage, where does it stop? Once the Parker Bowles children are partially inside the royal circle, what is the argument against the next family, the next connection, the next step relative seeking proximity to the throne? He won't open that door. And from a purely institutional perspective, there are serious people who would argue he is absolutely right. But here's the tension at the heart of this that no one inside the palace seems willing to address directly. The monarchy's greatest vulnerability is not who holds a title. It is whether the institution feels human, whether the public can look at this family and believe they are watching something real rather than a performance. And when a grandmother, the actual queen, is left sobbing alone in her private rooms because her grandson was passed over in silence, without even the basic courtesy of a conversation, something deeply human is being sacrificed on the altar of institutional clarity. Is a monarchy that is perfectly bloodline pure, but privately devastating worth preserving? Boards Eddie, that is not a rhetorical question. It is the question that will define the institution for the next generation. Camilla's legacy and what remains. Here is what makes this moment genuinely tragic. Separate from any political analysis or institutional debate, Camilla Rosemary Parker Bowles spent the better part of her adult life being defined by one relationship, and not in a flattering way. She was the other woman, the villain, the obstacle to a fairy tale. She endured a level of public contempt that most people could not withstand and remain functional, let alone graceful. And she endured it quietly, without breaking publicly, without retaliating in the press, without playing the victim card she could have played many times. She absorbed it, and she kept going. And the private story she told herself through all of that, according to people who know her well, was this: it will be worth it, for the king, for the crown, for my family. One day, all of this sacrifice will mean something for the people I love. That story has now been taken from her, not loudly, not with a dramatic confrontation or an official decree, just quietly, in the form of a press release she read like a member of the general public. She is Queen of England. Her grandson will never carry a royal title. And she found out from the same announcement you read on your phone. That is the reality of Camilla's position now. She will continue her royal duties. She will attend the ceremonies and the galas and the garden parties. She will stand beside Charles and smile and wave and fulfill every expectation of the role she spent decades earning. But she now does all of that, knowing something she perhaps suspected for years and now knows for certain. She may wear the crown, but her legacy, the thing that outlasts the ceremonies and the photographs, ends with her. The Parker Bowles name will not be inscribed in royal history. Her grandchildren will not take part in the ceremonies that will define the next chapter of this institution. What she carries forward is a crown that cannot protect the people she loves. And for someone who endured everything she has endured, it's hard to imagine a lonelier truth. What comes next? So where does this leave the monarchy heading forward? The short answer is more divided than the public understands. Not divided in the sense of an impending constitutional crisis or a formal rupture, but divided in the human sense, in the sense that matters most in the long run. Charles and Camilla are navigating a private wound that royal protocols have no mechanism to heal. William and Catherine continue building their streamlined, bloodline-focused vision with the quiet confidence of people certain they are right. And somewhere in between, Camilla's grandchildren are growing up watching all of it. Royal historians who track these patterns say blended families have always created complications in royal lineages. What is unusual is the degree to which this dynamic, the conflict between Camilla's hopes and William's vision, has reached a decisive flashpoint, while both the king and the heir are still active. What insiders say is most worrying is not the immediate fallout, it is the pattern. If this is how decisions about Camilla's family are communicated, or rather, not communicated, then the relationship between queen and heir is more fractured than the public has been allowed to see. And fractured relationships inside institutions built on internal trust do not stay stable indefinitely. But the monarchy-level question, what kind of institution William is building and who gets to belong to it, has now been answered, clearly, without apology. Prince George has his title. The future is Windsor. And for Queen Camilla, the crown that was supposed to be the final chapter of her redemption has revealed one last, quietly devastating truth. Some battles, even when you win the crown, you still lose. If you've made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person who understands that the real royal story is never the one in the press release. It is always what happens when the cameras are off and the doors are closed. What do you think? Was William right to hold the line on bloodline, or did this cross a line that should never have been crossed? Leave your answer in the comments below. This debate is far from over. If this gave you something to think about, smash the like button and subscribe to Crown Watch so you don't miss what comes next. Because if today is any indication, the next chapter of this royal saga is going to be extraordinary.